Hello, this is Anka Corbin with Globig. I am here in London at Ye Whitehorse, and my guests today are Tim and Carrie from Fitz Law, a charter accountancy firm here in London, which is what we call a CPA firm. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'd love for you to please introduce yourselves and tell me a little bit about what you do at Fitz Law. I'm going to start with you, Tim.
Okay, well, I'm Tim Atkins, and I'm Director of F&L Financial Services, part of Fitzgerald Law Group, and we look after the employee benefit function here. So in essence, we help overseas headquartered companies set up in the UK. We do a compare and contrast with their employee benefit program in their home territory, and then we put a recommendation together for what is appropriate for recruitment and retention in the UK.
Okay, how about for you, Carrie?
Hi, so I'm the Director of International Payroll and HR Services. My role also incorporates employment tax and expatriate taxes, so it's quite broad. Predominantly I look after the people, so pay and reward, and look after the tax implications, international social security, and actually paying people, as well as the financial reporting and compliance submissions to the relevant revenue authorities.
So paying people, that's awfully important. So situation, a company is ready to expand here into the UK. They've got their first folks that want to come over. They're all excited. They're ready to pack up their family and move over. It's not that simple though, right? There are some things that they need to consider. Let's talk a little bit about those. Kind of what do you think are the most important things to think about as one of those people that's just being shipped? Like, what do you have to prepare for? What do you need to know? Who would like to start?
I can start.
Okay.
I mean, I think the key issue, and it sounds very basic, is that you need to identify the differences. And everybody talks very blithely about it, but there are significant differences between being resident in the US and coming to work in the UK. And I think if everybody can buy into those differences, then the whole process will be a lot easier. But that's really a starting point. And then I think there's some significant issues, particularly from a tax perspective, a relocation perspective, taking advantage of housing allowance tax breaks, which is very much Carrie's field, and maybe you can walk us through some of that, and then I can talk through some of the benefit issues that support
absolutely.
that.
Let's talk a little bit about that.
So absolutely. So I think first and foremost, we depend on the actual company itself and the amount of support they're going to give to their employee to actually move them overseas. So it could be that an individual is on a very basic package and they're given a certain amount of cash. They're sent into the overseas location and they have to pretty much start from scratch in terms of sourcing housing, schooling if they've got children, and they can be pretty much left on their own. So they will need support in country that perhaps isn't provided by the company, and that's where we can sort of step in and start to give that support. In contrast, it might be what's known as a full equalisation package, where there's an awful lot more money provided, so that the full end-to-end relocation is supported by the company, and they themselves might source the housing and then put that person in location and sort of take care of everything. Mm-hmm. So we sort of deal with both ends of the spectrum, really, and how a person might be moved. So housing, absolutely, that's a really important issue, and typically accommodation will be rented. The first perhaps 30 to 60 days one might typically be staying in a hotel, whilst longer term accommodation is sourced. And then after that it's sort of, moving if a family's coming over as well. Schooling is very important, and just generally helping the individual settle in.
I think also one of the key issues, again, that people forget, which isn't really a business issue, is that if a family are coming over, so there's the employee and their partner or spouse, is what's going to happen to their partner or spouse if they're not working in the UK, because often they're left very remote to the process. If they don't have children, there isn't a ready-made infrastructure for that individual, and I think sometimes there needs to be consideration for that individual, helping them better acclimatise in the locality. And also the employee and the company, I think, need to recognise that, because we've seen that time and time again where a couple will come over if they don't have children, and it's very difficult for the individual that isn't working in the UK if they're not. So there needs to be some thought, I think, put to that individual.
What are some things that you see companies doing? Like, what are some specific things that make that transition easier?
I think there's some opportunities where companies will step in, and we can do this to a certain extent, but we can work with third parties, where they will just do a little bit of oversight with that individual to explain the differences. You know, real simple things like, you know, you may not in the UK take your shirts and blouses to the dry cleaners on a Friday because it would be too expensive here, where you would do that in the US and you might do it in Canada, but actually don't just expect to do the same thing in the UK. We had some situations a few years ago where individuals didn't know how to use the washing machines because they were a different, you know, mechanism here. So it's real basic stuff sometimes to help people integrate into the local community, but also just helping them to function.
Yes, absolutely. What are some of the challenges from an employment and a pension planning and a stock option planning and, you know, things like that? Because I would imagine they need to consider compensation and kind of what that whole package looks like before even making a good decision, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Shall I take that, Kerry? I think it's one of the things that's forgotten, and one of the differences and similarities between the US and the UK is the benefits package. In name, it's very similar. So pension, 401k, life insurance, disability, medical, dental. But there's different nuances and there's different cover levels, and of course we have the underpin of the National Health Service here, so the medical piece is very different. So again, it's a matter of helping people understand what those differences are. If an individual is coming over here on, say, a 2-year secondment, then often we'll recommend that they stay in the US Social Security system, which means they can stay on the 401k in the US, so they wouldn't necessarily join the pension in the UK, but they would potentially join the other benefits. And it's important, I think, that they understand the medical piece. They can still apply for a national insurance number, so FICA equivalent in the UK. Even though they may not be remitting Social Security, they'll still be paying income tax.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But that does mean that they also will have eligibility for the health service. And part of our role is to help them understand that, how to apply for the national insurance number, and how to get registered with the National Health Service at an early stage in the process. And also explain that the medical here is way different to what you're used to, which is a global, holistic healthcare solution, whereas here it's supplemental to the National Health Service. So
tell us a little bit more about that. I'm not sure that I even understand, you know, what the difference is between the two, and then...
In terms of the health service?
Yeah.
Okay, well, very quickly, I mean, we have an underpin so that for accident, emergency, long-term care solutions, or just for immediate medical needs, we would go to our GP. We go to the local surgery, which sounds a little bizarre, but it would be your doctor's office. It would be equivalent. There's no surgery at our GP's offices, but that's the phrase and term that we use. And we would work through that. So we would go to see the GP if we have a complaint. They often will make a recommendation and they'll make a prescription. Sometimes they'll say, okay, it's non-emergency. We'll need to have you checked out. Excuse me. We need to have you checked out. We'll put you on what we would refer to as a waiting list. And that waiting list might be 3 months long. That's the time that you would turn around to your GP and say, I've got private medical insurance, can you refer me? So you're then taken out of the National Health Service and put into the private sector. Ordinarily, 9 times out of 10, you go to the National Health Service first, but the 10th time you make it referred into the private sector. So it's a very different model. I suppose the National Health Service is the nearest equivalent to Obamacare. It's looking to provide basic level entry medical support. Mm-hmm. But we're very used to it in the UK. We complain about the weather and the National Health Service principally, don't we?
We do, absolutely.
But actually, it does a pretty good job, and I think we're lucky to have it.
Especially for, like you said, that first 90% of things that you take in care of. And then the private, is that usually something that the companies will supplement, or is that something you have to do as an individual?
It's normally a company-driven benefit. You can take it out individually, but the majority of our clients, and the majority of whom are US-based or Canadian-based, will always provide private medical coverage for their UK employees and for their expats coming into the UK. And the difference is that the co-pay element will be in relation to the premium that is payable on a monthly basis. It won't be in connection with medication or with prescriptions. It's merely the premium that's payable, and that's really what we've got to balance. We're making a recommendation for an equivalent plan.
Very interesting. What are some of the other things that companies usually have to be thinking about? So we have talked about payment and insurance. What are other things to really make it easier to live here?
think so. From a payroll perspective, it's actually looking at how is that individual going to receive their net pay delivery each month, and where are they going to receive it. So, for example, a US national coming into the UK, the US payroll will typically still be a live payroll, and in the UK, because there will be revenue reporting requirements and certainly income tax to pay, there has to be a payroll system in the UK also. So you've got two live payrolls, and then a decision has to be made as to who primarily is responsible for paying that individual, and where will they be paid. Will they be paid into a US bank account, or will they be paid into a UK bank account? So you have sort of personal issues for the individual. How do I set up a bank account in the UK? Or would I prefer to have my net pay delivery into a US bank account, and then that's up to the individual on if they're going to transfer funds to live on in the UK. So that takes time, so that requires a working relationship between a company like ourselves and the employer to share the relevant compensation data. That has to be analysed and decisions made on what's taxable in both locations or what's exempt in both locations, as well as looking at the social security positions. And as we've mentioned earlier, so there with accommodation, for example, if you come into the UK for a period that is 24 months or less, whilst in the first instance, if a company provides either the accommodation directly or provides a cash allowance for you to pay rent and accommodation, for an assignment of less than 24 months, that can be exempt from UK income tax. But the mechanism of getting the exemption isn't necessarily straightforward, so it could potentially be a payroll exemption, so those cash elements are not necessarily subjected to income tax, or it could be that it's a tax return exemption claim. So there are different sort of nuances of the actual mechanism. But essentially, to actually ensure that individual's monthly net pay delivery is correct and reconciled is where sort of my work comes into the sort of number crunching calculations, and to try and minimise the stress, because obviously an individual's net pay is very personal.
Yes.
And needs to be right.
Well, and it's different here in that you do have the national health insurance and you do have other taxes, and all of a sudden there's more being taken out, if you will. They're just completely different. What do you think that the individuals that you've been working with are least prepared for? What are the things that surprise people most about this, coming here and this whole process? What do you think?
I think cost of living.
Okay.
I think certainly in London, if people are coming to London, unless you're comparing London with New York or DC, the cost can be quite extreme in terms of just the literal getting about in London, as you will no doubt be aware, can be complex, although we've got a great underground system. At the same time, you need to think about it.
Yeah, it just takes more time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think cost, I think the Medicare system, the medical system is a big difference, and how we operate, I think coming back to all of what we've just been discussing, I think it's really important, Kerry, do you agree, that we would always want the company to talk to us or experts first.
Absolutely.
Before sending anybody over, and we've had several situations where companies have just sent people over. They said, well, we'll worry about the visa and the immigration issues in due course, but actually it's probably the worst thing to do. Absolutely. So I think, as we would say, get your ducks in a row.
Yes.
And then make sure everything is organised in advance, and that's definitely the right way to go.
That's it. Have a conversation. It's great, conversation in advance and plan. As you say, if you're looking at a situation retrospectively, it can be costly, it can be messy, and it can be very stressful to start sort of fixing things retrospectively and having various, usually revenue submissions. You get the different revenue authorities, suddenly you're on their radar and they wonder why they haven't known about you previously, and correspondence typically goes to the individual in the first instance rather than the company. So
and they're all stressed about it, right?
Absolutely. So if you can have that just initial conversation to start planning in advance, it makes such a difference to all involved.
Yeah. Let's talk about the personal element too. So how do you acclimate? What are some tips that, things that you've seen work, things that didn't work? I've heard, and I know I've been in this situation where the expat life is lonely, right? You don't always get connected. What are some success ideas and some things that you may want to not do?
I think there's probably a number of networks that you can join, and we would recommend that people do that. And I think we know enough companies and enough people that have come over here to be able to say to them, we know somebody that's coming into town, actually would you mind talking to them? I think that's really important. So they hear it not just from us because we're talking theory, although we've got practical knowledge. It's good that they hear it from somebody who's actually done the same thing. So I think that's important. I think the US Embassy and British American business groups and other business groups that there are in the city provide great opportunities. There are good networking opportunities. And I think to come open-minded, I think that's really important. And for all that we share the same language, as we always say, just about we share the same language, there are some differences. And it's important to accept those differences. And I've seen this in reverse where Brits have gone to the US and they've kind of kept in their commune of expats and they don't go out of it. And all they do is moan about the US and talk about how great it is back in the UK. Well, I'm not quite sure why they went in the first place if that's the case. So I think people just need to be understanding, they need to be open-minded, and they need to ask questions. And don't be afraid to ask questions. I think it's really important.
And embrace change. Absolutely, be confident, and as you say, ask the question, just ask for information, embrace the change, and try and enjoy it.
Yeah, and accept there's going to be some missteps along the way. Many years ago, if I just share a story with you, I presented to a group of business people in Minneapolis, and I was talking about offshore pension funds. And we talk about in the UK pension schemes, and of course scheme has a different connotation in North America. So I spent the first 20 minutes talking to international lawyers and accountants about how, in their words or their wisdom or their thought process, I was talking about money laundering offshore. And of course I had to stop and say, you know, are you all comfortable with this? And a chap stood up and said, are you really talking about money laundering, pension monies offshore schemes? I said, no, I'm not. And then he explained, well, a pension scheme is a scam, but a pension scheme in the UK is a program. So it's understanding those differences and accepting them and making sure you don't make that same mistake twice.
As a whole, do you find that Brits are easy to get to know, or do they take time to warm up? Would you consider it easy to get your group of friends developed?
I think it can be. Again, I think you just need to be open-minded and accommodating, talk to existing people that have come over here and get in the community, go to sports events, accept that our football is different to your football, it's soccer, as you call it. Get to know cricket and understand what the differences and similarities are with baseball, get to see where it's come from and how it relates. There's such a lot of crossover, and actually there are probably more similarities than differences, but we all get obsessed by the differences. So I think just get involved.
Okay.
I think that's
and you're
Absolutely, I would agree, and it is going to be different. There are going to be cultural differences. There's a lot of change. It can be quite scary at times, and you know, perhaps the British may appear to be slightly standoffish in nature compared to, you know, US citizens. We're not all like that. So it's really sort of having that confidence and embrace the change and really want to enjoy the experience. So yeah, no. Definitely.
And the Queen won't be able to invite everybody to tea, but she'll try.
Yeah, we didn't get an audience with her this time either. It just means we're not where we need to be at.
Next time, maybe.
Yes, we will. We will absolutely try to do that. So thank you both for your time. Very, very great advice. And again, this is what makes the United Kingdom a fantastic place to either start up in or to expand your business in. This is Anke with Globig. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.